right, welcome to the Pura Vida Coaching Friday Framework session. Today you're going to not see or hear from head coach Stephanie Combs. She's actually recovering from a kidney infection. She'll join us again next week. So she's asked me to continue the conversation that we started over the last week or two about key numbers. So we're going to get into that in a little bit. I want to frame this up a little bit so you understand why some of this is so important. And it really gets to the heart of the tip of the week, which is a tendency, and we see this in the coaching clientele as well as agents that we've trained, and we've literally trained thousands of agents. And I don't know what it is about trying to handle an objection, and usually it comes up in the context of somebody sort of sideswipes you with something that you weren't ready for. But the general tendency, and it can easily be lumped into this, is to conduct your listing or buyer consultation over the phone. And I'm going to get into this in a minute on the script of the week about somebody who says, why should I meet with you? Why are you different than other agents? And there's a lot of variance on that. And the tendency was then to cover things that should either be covered in the case of a listing in your pre-list, or you try and just bury them with information about why you're awesome. You're the #1 agent. You're on the #1 team. You're a top agent, your office is #1. It just goes on and on and on. And all of a sudden you're off having a conversation with a buyer or a seller about why you're the best, why they should meet with you because of X, Y, and Z. And what you're essentially doing is conducting the listing or buyer consultation over the phone. And you want to avoid this at all costs. And the way I'm going to get into this today is talking about this from the standpoint of the script of the week and why you should be basically focused on doing something from an objection handling standpoint that is different than what the tip of the week suggests you don't do. So in other words, and I'm going to do this in the context of an expired listing, and I'll show you there's two ways that this would happen. So in other words, in the expired listing, I may ask the question that basically says, I'd like to apply for the job of selling your home. Are you familiar with the techniques I use to sell homes? And you can get any number of answers. A seller's going to be like, I've never even heard of you. Who are you? What company do you work for? And now, based on this tip of the week, you could go off and start doing your listing consultation. You can talk about how many homes you've sold or all these other things, and it doesn't solve the problem. So I'm going to run through this real quick in the script of the week, and then we're going to get into some numbers. So are you familiar with the techniques I use to sell homes? And the seller says, I've never heard of you. Are you kidding? And again, pay attention here. I'm not going to answer their question about why me, and I'm going to say, you're kidding. What would be the best time to show you? I've got some time at 4 o'clock today, or would sometime this evening, say after 6, work better for you? And I'm going to continue this on because a lot of times they're not going to just bowl over. It's not realistic. They may follow up with, I don't understand, because I've never heard of you. What are you different? The seller says, why would I possibly want to meet with you? Again, don't do the listing or the buyer consultation. That's exactly why I wanted to get together. What would be the best time to show you? Is today, if again, at 4, or would this evening be better after 6? Again, I'm not answering their question. They don't respect what you're doing if you just dump information on them. Seller then, or a buyer, could say, before I have you over, I really need to know more about what you're going to do that's different. Why would you be different? Why would I even want to meet with you? I don't know enough about what you're doing. And again, I'm not going to get into the details and handle my consultation over the phone. Here's what I would say. Actually, that's exactly why we need to get together, is that our approach to selling homes is very different from other agents. And before we meet, you'll actually have a very detailed packet of information in hand to review. And I tell you what, if you look at that information and you want to cancel the appointment, you can cancel the appointment. Let's do the right thing here, and let's set a time to meet. Why don't we do it for tomorrow evening after 6, or I actually could have some time earlier in the afternoon, say 4 o'clock. Which would be better for you? Now, if the seller is still not buying on it, again, Mr. Seller, if you look at this information and you don't see that we are demonstrably different and our track record doesn't show that you ought to basically meet to figure out how to get your home sold, call me up and cancel the appointment. Does that make sense? Our experience is by not handling this by dumping information on them, You want your pre-list and your information about you that you deliver to actually handle all these objections. Now, if you don't have a pre-list, this isn't going to work. If you haven't thought out how to handle some of these things, it's not going to work. So that was a little bit longer run through script of the week and tip of the week. I bring this up because we're seeing, again, the problem with people handling listing presentations or buyer consultations over the phone. This could be exactly the same thing with a buyer. If you've got a buyer consultation packet that talks about your buying process and why they should work with you, get it in their hands, set an appointment, and then work towards that appointment and give them the opportunity. The takeaway of Mr. Seller or Mr. Buyer, you're in control of whether we actually meet. You can call back and cancel if you look at the information and decide it's not worth your while to meet, is a powerful statement that actually reinforces your confidence that they are, in fact, going to do this. You can lay on another comment, which is the following, and then I'm going to get into today's topic. You can say, I can tell you what, after sending these packets out to sellers who were just as frustrated as you were and wanted to understand why they should meet with us and how we're different, I can tell you that it is very rare that we get a call back to cancel an appointment. That doesn't mean that you can't do it if you don't feel the same way, but I tell you what, we'll do the right thing, and as we've discussed, we'll meet tomorrow evening at 6. And again, here's my phone number. If you decide after looking at the information and talking it over with your wife, you want to cancel, please call me, and I'd be happy to cancel the appointment. Extremely powerful way to handle things. Don't go through the process of dumping information and talking about your track record and we've sold X number of homes with the #1 team. You sound like every other agent. Every agent tries to embellish and do things there. So with that, let's get into the topic today. The topic today is on numbers. We've been talking about market numbers and the reason that it's important to be an expert in the market. We've talked about the total market overview. And what we're going to get into today is a little bit of a discussion about some of the KPIs, or basically key production numbers, indexes, whatever you want to call it, for you and for prospecting. Why is this important? We're going to get into this in detail. This will be part one of what we're going to cover. And the reason this is important is a KPI is a number that would be on your dashboard. It would be like knowing whether your fuel tank's on full or empty and how things are performing. It might be the engine light or the oil light. These are key numbers that if you're not paying attention to them, you're essentially flying blind. You're not understanding about your level of performance, your level of production and efficiency. An example of them that I would give you would be, for example, we're going to talk a little bit about today, would be the number of hours that you have time blocked for a key task like lead generation, your prospecting time, the number of hours that you've dedicated for lead follow-up. Why would some of those numbers be so important? Well, here's the basic net on this. If you cut corners on those two key tasks, you will see, and we can look at your numbers very quickly and tell where you're having your problems, that you're going to have it cascade through the rest of your KPIs. For example, if you're not time blocking enough time for key tasks like prospecting or lead follow-up, it's going to show up in one or two of the areas. One of the ways it's going to show up, for example, if you don't time block enough time for lead generation, is your number of contacts are going to be much lower than they should be. How does that cascade into other numbers like we've talked about? Well, if you're, say, for example, only talking to 20 people and your number for, let's take the buy side, is 25 or 30 for you or for your buyer agents, and they're only talking to 15 or 20 people, they can go through an entire prospecting period. And if that number is for the week, they can go for an entire week and not ever set an appointment. For sellers, it's the same thing. Let's say that, for example, when I used to do a lot of prospecting to expireds and withdrawn listings, my number was somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 35 contacts to get an appointment. My number was 55 or 58, depending on how the market conditions were, for me to take a listing for every contact. So I knew what my numbers were. Now imagine you just don't know what your number is. It's a way for you to understand, am I doing the activities that I need to do to be successful? How does this cascade further into your business? How does it help you with business planning? Think of it this way. If you know that based on your business plan, you need to run 3 appointments a week, and you know that it's going to take you, for an easy round number, 30 contacts. If your goal is 3 appointments and you need 30 contacts for an appointment, you better be just time blocking enough time so that you can get to 90 contacts in a week. And it really is that simple. And where we find that agents are off track is they don't even know the basic numbers. They don't understand how many contacts it takes to get an appointment. And this is the first sort of top part of this. And we can go back and why it's better to time block for a longer period of time, as you see there at the top of the screen. We find that it's a common struggle for agents if they say, I'm gonna try and prospect for 20 minutes, and then I'll get another 20 minutes in right before lunch, and then I'm going to do another 20 minutes later in the afternoon, and then in the evening I'll try and do an hour. What tends to happen is all sorts of distractions creep in, and human nature is such that those 20-minute blocks could easily get consumed by something urgent. When you're not in the groove of doing an activity, and this is related to the fallacy of multitasking. There is no such thing as multitasking. Multitasking is a form of distracted behavior. You think about texting and driving. Everybody thinks they can do it. You see people driving down the highway doing it. They are distracted from their main task, which is safely moving the vehicle down the road. Cell phone talk also has that. All the studies have shown that. Now imagine you're looking at a time block of 20 minutes. You know you've got an appointment coming up. You're not comfortable that you're ready for your appointment, and all of a sudden you say, you know what, it's only 20 minutes, I'll make it up later in the day, and you don't do your prospecting. Now you get to the end of the week. We hear this from coaching clients. Yeah, you know what, 2 or 3 days I did no prospecting. And we ask them why, and we dive in deeper. We find that very commonly they have a very, very short window time blocked. And they may have several of them, and they just don't ever get to those short windows. I used to prospect and indicate that on my calendar, no less than typically an hour. Most of my time blocks were 2 hours to 3 hours. That way, if I have a half an hour of it that I give up, I'm typically never less than an hour of activity. And one of the things that's interesting about these longer time blocks is my contacts per hour, my efficiency, my ability to handle objections got better and better and better. If you think about this in the sports analogy, do they run in football practice the drill once when they're doing blocking and tackling, for example? No, they run it again and again and again. Your ability to get good at handling objections and running the questions you need to run with buyers and sellers and handle objections, or conversely, that second important activity on lead follow-up, your ability to do that diligently and get better at it is directly related to how long the time blocks are that you actually schedule. And these should be scheduled in advance. And we can very quickly tell based on the key number of contacts, and this is right where it all starts. And then we dive down to the number of contacts. If they're too low, we first go to time blocks and the length of those time blocks. Do you have enough time on the task? If that's broken, we always go to, and there's a point in here about what should I focus on first. We always go to time on the task. The very fastest way to get on track is to allocate appropriate amounts of time. Appropriate amount of time is these longer time blocks, enough of them, and scheduled at a point in time where the prospects you want to reach, either through generation and lead follow-up, are available, and you're going to be at the phone, either at the office or if you prospect from home or do lead follow-up from either of those locations, you can be there. Don't set yourself up for failure by scheduling things during times that you're just not going to be available. You know that you typically will have challenges. And you just know that based on your activity level, you're at the lowest energy right then. Prospects are not available. Perfect example of that would be time blocking to follow up with buyers during the middle of the morning. Yeah, you know what, on most websites, buyers will put their cell phone number in, and they may or may not answer their cell phone at work, so your reach rate is going to be low. If you do reach them, two problems. One, they're at work, so they might rush you off the phone. And two, even more problematic, they'll tell you to call back, and now they'll store your number in the address book on their cell phone, and they'll say, don't answer, we're agent. And you never got to ask them any questions because they answered the phone and they rushed you off saying, I'm at work, call me back later. And now they can screen your calls. Now, obviously, you can combat that by calling from some different numbers, but the best activity is to set these time blocks at the right time of day. So the question here about why contacts to appointments is so important is you can build your entire plan around this, and then your coach can help you get better and better based on your ability to handle this. So let's look at the contacts to appointments. If you don't know what your number is, you have no idea about your efficiency. I gave the example on the buy side of approximately, and this is not just on our coaching clientele, but it's also on a national basis. We've coached thousands of agents. It's about 20 to 25 contacts to an appointment for somebody that's somewhat efficient. Well, this does two things for you. If you have a contact goal of, say, 50, that should generate 2 appointments. We can now start looking at your ratios to say, are you making enough contacts? If you are you converting? Is there a problem with asking for appointments? And if you know what your number is, you're going to know about your level of efficiency. You can see where I can build a business plan. And we used to always, on the team, talk with agents about not quitting on the 1-inch line. And what I mean by that is, let's say that your number is 25, and you walk out of the area that you're prospecting in and you've reached 18 people, and you say, you know what, not having a great day today, I need to leave. Well, I mean, you're on like the 5-yard line. You need to go make those 7 additional contacts and get that done, or even more, get 10 or 15 more contacts, get yourself an appointment. Quite often, agents don't relate the fact that if they don't know their numbers, how close they are, how to keep themselves motivated. You know what, I'm really only 5 or 10 contacts away from likely getting an appointment. And what you need to realize, and golfers get this, they may play well one day, they may not play well the next day, but they go out and they take those strokes on the driving range. They go hit that number of balls. Agents typically don't have this connection because they have no idea what their contacts to appointments number is. They have no idea how to track this. And at the bottom, we talk about what we should focus on first. And you heard me mention get your number of hours allocated in such a way that you can have a chance to succeed. And in the case of this agent we just talked about on the buy side, where it's 25 contacts, let's say we now have a brand new agent, and that brand new agent is prospecting. They're doing activity. They have followed the advice that we give, which is get enough time on the task, and they're doing the time. We always suggest that you focus first on the number of hours, then go to the number of contacts. And the reason I say this is so important is if you're doing the number of hours, and let's say, for example, you then calculate that you're not getting nearly enough contacts. Let's say you have 2 agents, buyer agent 1 and buyer agent 2. They're both prospecting, and one has 50 contacts, the other has 20 in the same amount of time. That allows us to very quickly look at the numbers and say they're either talking too long with people, they're not staying on the script and talking too long with people, or they're having conversations about things which is related to this that are completely off topic. And you may be shaking your head now because you know this is your challenge. If your contacts, and where the number falls with this is if your contacts per hour are super, super low, and it depends on what kind of calls you're making, but if they're very, very low, and let's say you're only, in an extreme example, talking to 3 to 5 people per hour, you're having very, very long conversations, trying to run your listing or your buyer appointment over the phone. In other words, your objection handling could be 10 minutes long because you're running part of your appointment on there. It's easy to start to address these things. So contacts per hour would be what we would look at after you're doing the number of hours if, for example, the number of contacts weren't there. So quite often, when somebody is new to bringing their number of people they talk to, the number of contacts up, when we coach people, and you've heard Stephanie talk about this, you've heard me talk about it, we tell people not to worry about anything other than get the time in and let's just see where the numbers are and not stress about it. Because once we understand what the numbers are, your coach can start to address things. You heard me mention just a few minutes ago that, for example, the number of contacts per hour can be indicative of not sticking to a script or trying to run your appointment over the phone. You still only get an appointment. Let's say that you've got a buyer agent and they still get their 1 or 2 appointments that in the time allotted. Well, if their contacts per hour are super low, the more than likely, and this is especially true on the listing side, they're handling part of their appointment over the phone. They're just having a conversation that is entirely too long. And what you got to remember is, whether it's a buyer or a selling prospect, they do not want you to run your appointment over the phone. They could care less. And the reason this is such a critical thing, you have to realize only 15% of what you communicate over the phone actually comes through. It's 15%. So do you think you're going to be more or less powerful in person? Especially if you use a buyer consultation packet that arrives before you meet with them, or a pre-list packet in the listing thing. As far as the scenario, are you going to be more or less powerful in person? Well, I'll tell you what, if you show up dressed professionally, you're going to be probably anywhere between 10 and 100 times more powerful. They have no idea who you are. So if you try and handle things over the phone, you're going to have a serious problem. And so when you talk about this bullet point here, and I'm going to get ready to wrap up, how to handle things from the standpoint of efficiency, what you have to remember is you could be very efficient or not very efficient. I can tell you that when I was running appointments, you heard me talk about knowing what my numbers were. I know exactly what my numbers were. I could look at and figure out if I was getting off track pretty quickly by knowing my ratios. I knew I needed to end up somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 35 contacts to get an appointment on the listing side. It was about 55 contacts to actually take a listing. Well, what does that tell you? I also know that I'm canceling some of my appointments because I qualify and requalify. I don't go on and take everything, which is another method of being more efficient. There's nothing like an anchor around your business of overpriced, non-motivated sellers. So this gets into the whole key performance indicators of a dashboard and what are some of those numbers. And just to recap as we wrap up today, you need to know how many hours did you spend on these tasks. And this works with both lead generation and lead follow-up. What were the number of contacts you made? That allows you to do a couple of things. You can figure out how many contacts it takes to get to an appointment, because you can also track the number of appointments you run. This works buy side or listing side. And then from there, there's a whole bunch of other efficiencies, and we're going to get into some of them next week that are related to listings taken, buyer listings taken, or a buyer agency agreement, if you want to call it that way. It's basically a listing with a buyer. And then contracts written or listings sold. And you can get more and more efficient to understand where the breakdowns are in your business. This is like an assembly line, and you need to understand what your numbers are, or you're just flying blind. So this is part one of our key performance indicators for your own business. And this works whether you're on a team. It works whether you're in individual production. These numbers are important, and we're going to get into next week some of the specifics, typical numbers that are tracked and what they indicate. I'm going to put them up on a dashboard so you can look at them. And then we're going to go even further by looking at some of the specifics for how you look at it all the way down to the level of business written and business closed, both on the listing and the buy side. So I appreciate your time today. We do try and keep these things to 20 or 25 minutes, and I've run through that. And we'll be back next week, and Stephanie will be back to join us. I appreciate it. Thanks.